So, I started learning Japanese about 3 years ago, back in 2021, sometime around July or so, which is when I'm recording this. And I've been making pretty slow progress, but that's mostly due to the fact that I'm going through some depression right now, so I don't really have a ton of energy or motivation to do things, which is why I haven't been making videos much lately. It's currently been 3 weeks since my last video, which was about Hightail. Anyway, I thought I'd talk a bit about language learning in general and my experience learning Japanese. Oh, hi. Because um, I'm very scatterbrained, so I'll be saying and pausing a lot, especially since I'm playing game. But the first thing I wanted to mention is how I want to give a bit of advice to anyone who's either learning Japanese or any other language or even something else entirely. And that advice is don't listen to all the advice. Well, listen to it and then try it out, see if it works for you. Give it a legitimate attempt. Like, don't just do a half-hearted attempt just to get it out of the way, but like give it a legitimate attempt, see if it works, and then if it doesn't, then do something else. Because a lot of people, actually pretty much everyone, will say, okay, this is the way you have to learn a language. This is the one way. I have the one singular best method for absolutely everyone to learn a language. And that's almost never true. In fact, I would go as far as to say it's never true. Because the thing is, everyone learns differently, and that's not something that a lot of these people know. Because, ow. Probably shouldn't have done this while playing a game, but I felt like doing that right now. But they're always like, oh, this is the way you have to learn a language. I'm fluent in 300 languages, so you can trust me. I know what I'm talking about. But the thing is, their brains don't work the same as yours, most likely. They might, but they also might not. So take everything anyone says with a grain of salt. Doesn't matter how accomplished they are, how many languages they know. Take it with a grain of salt, because it's going to need it. Because I personally have encountered some situations where I have tried the popular advice that everyone says you need to do, and it absolutely does not work for me. Even though everyone says you got to do it this way, this is how it works, this is how your brain works. It wasn't how my brain works, and so I didn't get anything out of it. I tried really hard, and it just did not work. For example, since I'm learning Japanese, a big part of that is the writing system, which there's three writing systems, hiragana and katakana, which are they're basically alphabets. You've probably heard that in like Chinese and Japanese, each character means one thing, it has a meaning. Well, hiragana and katakana are just the alphabet, so each character has no meaning. They're just ways to phonetically transcribe the language. So each symbol corresponds to a different sound. So that's actually the easiest way to write the language, and the easiest to read, easiest to learn, easiest to everything. But there's also kanji, which is that's the one where there's like 50,000 characters, and the meaning, move please, and the meaning and pronunciation is different for every word. That is not what I meant to. I need to unallocate that. I never use it. But that's the complicated one. and it's about as complicated as you think, except you don't need to learn all 50,000 characters, because no one does. It's like, no one knows all the words in the English language. In fact, most people don't even know common words, apparently, according to literally every post on the internet I see that misspells three-letter words. So, um, oh yeah, kanji. So, the stop saying so when you haven't finished a sentence thing is, God, I can't think. I'm busy playing a game. Let me just pause for a second so I can catch my thoughts. Okay, so kanji is that's a complicated writing system. And so everyone says that you have to learn kanji. Well, first off, they say that you have to use hiragana, which is the main alphabet system, most basic form of writing in Japanese. They say that you have to use that when studying. Like if you make flashcards or take notes, you have to do those in hiragana, because if you don't, then you won't be able to pronounce any of the words right because they sound different in English. Then, like, for example, OU is pronounced O in Japanese. It's pronounced U in English. So you, if you were to transcribe that into hiragana, then you would pronounce it yo instead of you. So basically the idea is that your muscle memory with how to pronounce words is already settled with English letters. So if you see a Japanese word spelled out with English letters, then you're going to be used to the English way of pronouncing it, so you're always, okay, not always, but you're going to get the Japanese pronunciation wrong. And so you have to use hiragana for all your studies and stuff. Well, problem with that is, number one, there's like a million languages out there that are pronounced completely differently from English, and they don't use a unique writing system. Case in point, French. If you can learn French with the English writing system, you can learn Japanese with it, because Japanese pronunciation, they have like half the sounds English does, and 90% of them work the same way that they do in English. For example, you see the word konnichiwa, you already know like 90% of how to pronounce that, because it's pronounced as it looks. The difference is, it's technically not konnichiwa, it's konnichiwa. So there's a bit of a pause there. But that's literally it. That's a difference. So you already, by default, are going to pronounce like 90% of words properly, or at least 90% properly. And also, it's not that difficult to learn the exceptions. Like, as long as you know what sound each vowel makes in Japanese, as well as the few combo sounds, like OU just pronounced as a longer O. As long as you know all those, which there's only like 4 or 5 rules to that, then you can speak Japanese, and it's really not that difficult to pronounce. Meanwhile, we got something like French, where you've probably seen that popular post going around talking about how to say bird in French, and it's something along the lines of like OIZAU or something weird like that. No, OISEAUX, I think. And want to know how it's pronounced? Oiseau. It's not pronounced anything like the way it's spelled. But the thing is, French doesn't even have its own writing system. You have to use English letters. Sometimes English letters with little wibbly bits over them, but English letters nonetheless. So if you can learn French with English letters, you can learn Japanese. The pronunciation, you can learn the entire pronunciation of the language in like 30 minutes. Like, you're not going to have it fully memorized and able to access it on the fly in 30 minutes, but after like a day or two, you'll probably have a pretty good handle on it. It's really not that complicated. So everyone says you use hiragana, but the thing is, I actually have decided to focus almost entirely on the spoken language, so how things sound and how I say things. And everyone says that's a bad idea, but it's what works for me. I have tried so many times to learn the writing systems, and every time I just end up getting demotivated and stopping learning for a while. Which obviously is not very good for learning because when you take long breaks, then you tend to forget what you. Oh, come on. When you take long breaks, you tend to forget what you've learned easier. So, I'm 4 inches away. Use your sword. That's your foot. Good grief. I hate that ability. I kind of dodged that. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. So, if doing what everyone else does just demotivates me, but doing what I do, which is what everyone says not to do, if that makes it fun and enjoyable, I'm going to do that, even though it goes against what everyone else says. Because you need to find something that works for you, because everyone learns differently. And I've seen like 2 videos that bring this up, because everyone else thinks they have the one way to learn a language just because they're fluent in like 17 languages. Like Steve Kaufman, I think is his name. Steve something. Steve Krashen, maybe? I don't know. He is a polyglot that speaks a bazillion languages, and he says another piece of advice that I get a lot is from him as well, is he says that don't focus on learning grammar. Instead, just listen to the language a ton, and you'll naturally pick up the grammar. Just learn vocabulary, practice vocabulary, and listen to the language a ton, and you'll learn to speak it naturally. Well, I've tried that, and it probably does work eventually, but oh dear. It probably does work eventually, but the thing is, you have to listen to quite a lot without understanding anything. And while that's fine when doing something enjoyable like watching anime, the thing is, it takes so long to get to the point where you're actually understanding enough for it to be fun and for it to actually give you results. So they say don't study grammar, it's a waste of time. That's not how you learn your native language. You learn your native language by just having a ton of experience with it. I'm at like 2 health. You learn your native language by... Okay, you can stop attacking now, Melania. My gosh. They always want to say you have to learn like a baby. Learn the way you learned your native language. Problem is, you're not a baby anymore. Like, all the things you know about, like, nouns and verbs and adjectives, like, you have an idea of how words work by now. So you don't have a blank slate. When you have a blank slate, it's a lot easier to learn stuff. It's a lot easier to absorb stuff just through context. And the thing is, for some people, this does work. I mean, that's how all these people got fluent, so clearly it works for them. But I am not those people. And the only thing that has helped me significantly with language learning is learning grammar. Learning vocabulary as well helps, but say you'll pick up the grammar. If you know the vocabulary, you'll pick up the grammar by itself, but for me, I've noticed it's kind of the opposite. I don't know how to get in there. And, like, I cannot figure out what the grammar rules for a sentence are if I don't know. Like, I keep seeing sentences with, like, niwa in them, and I have no clue what that means. Turns out it can mean, like, 200 different things. So, clearly that advice doesn't always work. It can work for some people. I'm not one of them. Plus, there's the fact that different languages have different levels of complexity with their grammar systems. especially compared to each other. Like, Chinese grammar is going to be more difficult to learn than, I don't know, Spanish, I guess, because Spanish is similar in a lot of ways to English in terms of grammar, or at least that's what I've heard. But, um, so that advice isn't always going to work for everybody. For me, I've tested it. I've tried multiple methods. The only one that consistently works from the get-go is learning grammar. And everyone hates learning grammar, apparently. It's a very unpopular thing to learn, which may be why so many people say not to do it, is because they just don't want to. But the thing is, for me, I enjoy learning grammar. I enjoy just learning one or two new words and suddenly doubling the amount of things I can say understand the language. Like in Japanese, there's one particle. I've never held a bow until this moment, apparently. There's one particle, one word, that you add it to the end of a sentence and it changes it into a question. And so by learning that, you learn one word and immediately double the amount of things you can say and understand, because it changes it from a statement to a question. And making progress that quickly, that makes me feel accomplished. It makes me feel like I'm making progress, because I am. And so that's fun for me. That's what I enjoy doing. That's what's easiest. And people act like it's a one-size-fits-all thing. If this is how it worked for me, then that's how it works for everybody else. So they always say don't study manually, don't bother trying to learn grammar, babies don't learn grammar, etc., etc. But that's what works for me. So try everything and see what works for you, and don't listen to the people that say not to do it. Another thing is, people say that you should learn kanji in Japanese, which is, again, that's a really complicated writing system. You can do that. It's not a bad idea, and it works. It helps a lot of people. It works for a lot of people, but not everyone. Where was I? Another thing is there another thing? Hang on, let me pause. Oh yeah, so that's my advice about language learning, is just too long didn't watch. Take every bit of advice with a grain of salt, including what I say. Just try different things, see what works for you, and do what's most fun and what's most effective for you. Second thing is, I think people are wrong about how difficult Japanese is. 90% of the difficulty comes from kanji. Like, if people say you can learn hiragana and katakana in a day, that's like 100 different symbols when you count the ones that are just slightly modified versions of other ones that are pronounced differently. And those ones are easier to learn than learning an entirely unique symbol, but I still count it. I still count those as words because they're symbols or patterns of symbols that you have to learn. So you have to learn like 100 different things, and you can't realistically learn all that in one day. The thing is, you can learn it, but it's not going to stick. There's like two levels of learning. Imagine that you're trying to write something in a creek, and one level of learning is just writing in the dirt with your finger, or in the like silt at the bottom of the creek. When you do that, yes, you'll have it written, but the water is going to wash it away pretty quickly. So that's when you just learn something, like the day that you start learning hiragana and katakana. I'm going to allocate my flask. The day you start learning hiragana and katakana, you're going to you'll have it not memorized, but you'll have a pretty decent level of remembrance for it. But it'll take you a few seconds per symbol per character, per thing. It'll take you a few seconds to translate it. And that's not sustainable reading speed. And that's why I don't like using it, because if I use English letters, or Romaji as it's called, then I don't have to focus on translating the Japanese symbols into English sounds, or into sounds, and then also into learning what the word means. Because I have to translate the hiragana into sound first, and then translate the sound into a word. And that's an extra step. I've seen one source bring this up, but that's an extra step for every single sentence you try and read, every word you try and learn. If you learn it in hiragana and katakana for a good while, at the beginning, it's going to be difficult. It's going to take extra time. And when you learn slower, that's more demotivating, and you tend to learn the slowest at the beginning of the language. And so that's when the number one most common time that people give up learning a language is right at the beginning, after like a few weeks or a month of learning the language. That's when most people give up. And so getting over that hump is probably the most important thing to start with, which is why I think you should start slowly, because that takes less. It's easier, and so it's less demotivating.
I see. You can see it then. Well, I'm tarnished, but unlike you, I've seen still. I'm privy to a few. Would you care to learn? As a fellow tarnished, once guided by grace, I'd love to help you.
Hi, puppy.
My dog is here.
Hello, baby. Oh, hi. My cat is here, too. Hello. Everybody's here. Yeah, everybody's here. You want pets? Pets for the pets, huh? Yeah. You're so soft. And you are perfectly shaped for pets. Optimized for maximum pettage. Yeah. Precious babies. I'm gonna have to edit all this. Well, maybe not. You can just skip forward. If you hit the right arrow on your keyboard, it'll just skip forward 5 seconds. Or you can double tap the screen if you're on mobile. So, a lot of the things that people... it doesn't say what the requirement is. Does this not have a requirement? Guess not. Might as well get all of them. No reason not to.
The battle art you've learned, they were conceived at the Great Academy in the past. They obeyed and fascinated that the Golden Order was pliable enough with the Order broke such adaptability.
So, when I focus on just using Romaji, English letters, to learn Japanese words and grammar and stuff, it's a lot easier for me. And so, if it's easier, then that just makes it more efficient. So yeah, the main difficulty with learning Japanese is just the writing system. The grammar is actually incredibly simple and maybe not intuitive, it felt kind of intuitive to me, because I feel like different people's brains will work differently, so there's some languages that will be easier for people than others. And I think for me, Japanese is one of those languages that works better with my brain than other languages. So for me, learning Japanese is probably easier than learning Spanish or French, just because it makes more sense to me, it comes more naturally to me, and also it's more fun for me. I have zero interest in those other languages. So even though they're generally more similar to English, they would be harder for me to learn just because I have no interest. And interest and motivation make things a lot easier. So, despite the fact that some languages are going to be closer to your native language than others, and the grammar will be more familiar, and they'll have more similar words, there's not going to be one language that's objectively easier for everyone to learn. And there's a thing in some languages that you've probably heard of called gendered nouns, and that's basically where each noun has a gender, and the gender of the noun determines like which version of the word the you need to use. So not only do you need to memorize what each noun means, you also need to memorize what gender it is and what version of the you need to use. Japanese doesn't have that. It's not a gendered language. And the concept of gendered languages just sounds incredibly difficult to deal with, and I'd rather worry about something that is also something that a lot of people find difficult, and that's keigo, which is politeness levels. People, I think, overthink politeness levels and overestimate how difficult they are. Because, yeah, there are like 3 ways to say everything in Japanese. There's casual, polite, and formal, like very extra formal, like the kind of thing you'd see. You'd hear stuff like "good sir" in English. That would be a good analogy for friendly fire, literally. That's a good analogy, I think. And people think, oh, well, that means that you have to learn a different version of everything. But the thing is, it all follows simple patterns that are consistent and make sense. So not like English. You don't have to learn a different version of every noun. You just need to learn the patterns. Like, for example, the basic form of a verb, the most simple form of a verb, is the dictionary form. That is the casual form, the informal form. Then there's the mas form, which there's a couple simple rules to change any verb into the mas form from the dictionary form. Once you memorize that, then you can easily understand the formal versions of a verb without even needing to. You don't have to learn it for each verb, because once you learn that pattern, it becomes natural to you after a while. So you don't have to learn it for every single word, unlike with gendered languages. And additionally, so for example, for most verbs, it's just drop the U at the end and add mas or imas, and that's it. That's how you make it formal. That's one rule, and once you get used to that rule, then you've basically mastered not only the informal version of that verb, but also the formal version. So it's really just 1 or 2 words that get changed, and they all get changed consistently in the same way. And also, there are like multiple levels, like I mentioned. There's like the super polite version, but that's not used very often. It will come up, like in customer service they'll use it, but other than that, like when you're watching anime or something, or YouTube videos, it's probably not going to come up very often. So it's even simpler than that. And as I mentioned, I'm not learning the written language, which makes the whole thing a lot easier. Excuse me. So that's an option which everyone says don't do it. You cannot learn the language without a writing system. Well, I've been doing it and it's been working pretty well. The only reason it's taken me this long to get to where I am is just because I've been kind of depressed and unmotivated. If it weren't for that, then I would be probably fluent by now, honestly. It's been 3 years and I'd probably either be fluent or close to fluent. So yeah, a lot of the language is just very simple patterns like that, where you just have to learn like 1 or 2 words or word endings, and once you know that, then you've pretty much figured that whole thing out. Oh right, my analogy about the pond or the creek. So when you first learn something, it's written in the sill at the bottom of the creek, and the creek will very quickly wash away what you've written. So what you have to do is you have to carve it into the stone at the bottom of the creek. And every time it's like you're writing it with another stone, you're scratching the stone with another stone, and by doing that, you're deepening the writing of, you're deepening your memorization and understanding of that thing a little bit more every time you what's the word, rehearse? Well, we'll go with that. Every time you rehearse it, you are deepening your understanding of it, and eventually you'll get to the point where you can do it just without thinking. Like, for example, the past tense version of verbs is actually kind of complicated. The informal past tense, and different verbs will have a different form of the past tense, a different version, depending on how they end. And at first that almost made me quit, because I was like, there's no way I'm going to learn this. Now it's one of the easiest parts of the language, because I can do it by feel, because my brain sees the verb, it sees how it's spelled, and it's like, oh, I remember how to do this, and then the right version of the past tense just pops into my head without me having to think about it. So that's, at that point, you've carved it into the stone enough that it's pretty much permanently etched in there. The water will wash it away, but it'll take a lot longer, and that's when you really understand something, when you've practiced it enough that, like, you've got that. And that's the level of understanding you want to have for everything eventually. And that's pretty much when you become fluent, when you don't have to manually translate stuff, because you're so used to it that your brain just does it automatically. So when you start off doing everything with hiragana, or when you start off learning hiragana, then you're going to have a very surface level memorization of all the characters, which is why I say you can't learn it in a day. You can get familiar with them in a day, but you can learn all of them in a day, but to get familiar with them, it takes a while, because the first day you're just going to have that stilt level of understanding, and it's not going to. You're still going to have to manually think up every part of it. So it doesn't come naturally to you then. Where was I going with this? I had a point. See, I was thinking about not everyone learns languages the same way. You don't have to learn the writing system. Oh yeah, so I was talking about how easy Japanese is compared to how easy people make it sound, how difficult people make it sound. And so like I said, the grammar is very consistent. Most of it is just learning a few rules for how to conjugate different verb endings. Conjugating basically just means you change or add something to the end of the word, or any part of the word, but usually the end. And when you do that, it changes the meaning. So like how with a lot of English words, you just add ed. I don't know why that's so difficult to say. You add ed to the end, and that makes it past tense. But the thing is, that's not true for all words. Like, sleep is not sleeped, it's slept. There's a ton of exceptions. Japanese has very few exceptions. And so that makes it a lot easier to learn than English, but also a lot easier to learn than a lot of other languages. Because it's a lot more consistent, which means that there's less memorization you have to do. So basically, when someone tells you a certain language is really hard, they mean in general for most people, not necessarily for you. So even if someone says a language is super hard, that doesn't mean you should just give up on trying to learn it. Because for all you know, that could be the language that works best with your way of thinking, and it could be the easiest and most fun language for you. And another thing is, it tends to be ranked highly difficult to learn along with the other Asian languages, just because they're so difficult for native English speakers. So for a native English speaker, the Asian languages are considered to be some of the hardest because they're just so foreign. But from what I know about like Spanish and French and stuff, those are not that much less foreign than Japanese. But another thing is that they also tend to overestimate how difficult Japanese is compared to other Asian languages. Like, some people think that Japanese is harder than Chinese, which is, I would say, almost objectively not true, because it doesn't have gendered nouns, but it has tones, where every single word, like, there's like 4 or 5 tones. It's like, there's like a low tone, a high tone, a low to high tone, a high to low to tone, and even if you pronounce it exactly the same every time, if you use a different tone, it completely changes the meaning. So there's like 7 variants, 7 ways to pronounce each word, and you have to remember which one to use for every single one, which is, you know, that's difficult. So, but just because Japanese has more than one writing system, it's considered harder, even though the other writing systems actually make it a lot easier. Like I said, you can just use hiragana for everything instead of katakana, or instead of kanji. I probably should have timed that better. Or done that better. One last thing is, people talk a lot about comprehensible input, which I can't apparently do in English, because that's basically just listening to something where you understand like 80% of it, like I mentioned before. And they say that you should do that. You should just listen to stuff that you understand the majority of, and then your brain will fill in the gaps and naturally learn everything else. Only problem is, if you can already understand 80% of the language, then you're already pretty much fluent at that point. Like, not completely fluent, but and then of course there are different difficulty levels. Like, so like you might understand 90% of a kid's language or a kid's TV show, but only like 40% of an adult's TV show. And so so you'll have some input that's easily comprehensible and some that isn't. But again, even when you're first starting out, it's going to be really hard to find even like kids media that is going to be comprehensible for you. And by the time you get to the point where you're able to do consolidated input, that's not what it's called, comprehensible input, which is the opposite of this video, then I mean, you're already really close to fluent, or maybe not really close, but you're getting pretty close. And from there, it's not much of a problem. So they say you should do that instead of learning grammar patterns and stuff, but unless you know those grammar patterns, not much is going to be comprehensible. That's a common thing in language learning, is people have trouble finding comprehensible input. So, my basic points from this video, which I may cut up into multiple ones, I don't know. My basic points are, different languages will be easier for different people. So just because people say a language is hard doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be one of the hardest languages for you. And additionally, everyone learns differently, so just because someone learned in one way doesn't mean everyone needs to learn that way. Oh yeah, that reminds me of something. Everyone says that, well, all the polyglots, all the people that know a ton of languages, they say that you should just watch a ton of TV in that language and you'll pick it up automatically. And they have to know what they're doing because they know like 17 different languages. But I think this is a case of survivorship bias, because you only hear people talking about their success stories for the most part. Like, when you listen to Takashi from Japan interview people who are fluent in Japanese, most of the time, most of the time he only talks to people who know the language, who are fluent. And so you only hear about you only hear from the people who are fluent, and the smarter you are, the easier it is going to be for you to learn a language. And so consider that maybe the reason they're able to learn that way is because they're like smarter and better at language learning and just thinking in general. And it's not that learning that way makes you fluent more, it's just that the people who are likely to become fluent are the people that are able to learn that way. And us mere mortals have to learn languages in a different way, because that method isn't going to work for all of us. It might work for you. As I said, give everything a try and then see if it works for you. But So just because someone knows 200 languages and says you need to learn a specific way, that doesn't mean that you need to learn that way. Because like I said, everyone learns differently. And for some reason, even the smart people that can become polyglots don't know that. So I think that's about it for this video. If you're learning any languages, let me know in the comments. I would love to hear about it. Any language, English even. English, French, Japanese, Spanish, Esperanto, Klingon, even sign language. Sign language actually has its own unique grammar, which most people don't know. So leave that in the comments. If you agree or disagree or have any tips or advice or anything at all, leave it in the comments. Literally any kind of comment, go ahead and leave it. If it's weird or inappropriate, I can always just delete it, because you can do that. So hopefully this video helped you in some way. I think it probably did. I think it probably would have, but as I mentioned, everyone learns differently, so maybe this video didn't work for you. I've been babbling long enough. Outro words, bye.